The silence of solitude may feel like punishment, but the silence of fake companionship is a prison you never escape. Better to stand alone than to walk with those who do not value you. Let that sink in for a moment. Because here's the raw truth. Nothing drains your soul faster than carrying people who wouldn't even flinch if you were gone. You poured out your time, your loyalty, your love, and what did you receive in return? Silence, betrayal, and smiles that never reached the eyes. And for what? To keep close those who were never truly with you in the first place. Standing alone feels terrifying at the beginning. The silence bites like winter air. Nights stretch endlessly. Mornings feel unbearably cold, and loneliness presses down like an invisible weight. But here's the paradox few ever realize. Being surrounded by those who don't value you is far lonelier than walking alone, because when you're alone, at least you're honest with yourself. At least you're not forced to pretend. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The same wisdom applies to people. If they do not value you, do not walk with them. If their presence costs you your peace, then solitude is the cheaper, wiser price to pay. This video is about strength, about emotional intelligence, unshakable boundaries, and the rare kind of self-worth it takes to choose solitude over disrespect. By the end, you'll see why walking alone with dignity is far more powerful than walking with a crowd built on lies. Stay with me, because once you grasp this truth, you will never again chase empty companionship. You'll learn to stand in silence and discover a peace so deep it makes you untouchable. But here's a harsh reality that few dare to say aloud. Not everyone who stands beside you truly values you. Many only value what you give, and once the giving stops, so does their loyalty. Think about it. How many times have you poured yourself out? Your energy, your attention, your compassion, only to realize that the moment you slowed down, they disappeared. They were never loyal to you. They were loyal to the benefits, to the light you carried, the strength you offered, the comfort you provided. Once the supply ended, so did the relationship. That's why the Stoics warned us, never confuse the crowd for companionship. Epictetus once taught, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid by others. In other words, do not cling to validation, because when you cling, you will always find yourself surrounded by people who tolerate you only when you're useful. And here's the brutal truth about value. Your worth doesn't vanish when someone fails to recognize it. Their blindness does not make you invisible. It simply proves they are incapable of recognizing something rare. This is where emotional intelligence becomes your shield. When you stop making excuses and start observing patterns, you realize most people are not invested in you. They are invested in what they can take from you. That realization cuts deep. It feels like betrayal. It feels like being abandoned in the middle of a storm you once helped others survive. But in reality, it isn't betrayal. It's revelation. You are finally seeing what was always there, stripped bare of illusions. And here's the psychological trap. Because we all crave connection, we too often tolerate disrespect disguised as friendship. And this is where the story continues. Because after seeing how people value only what you give, you begin to notice an even darker truth. Manipulation often wears the mask of love. Selfishness hides behind the excuse of being too busy. We rationalize their absence. We defend their silence. We whisper to ourselves, they must care deep down. But here's the truth. If someone values you, you won't be left guessing. You won't have to beg. You won't have to chase. This is the moment when psychological boundaries must rise. Boundaries are not towering walls designed to lock people out. They are filters, sharp, necessary filters that protect your self-worth. Without them, you will keep pouring out until you are bone dry. And when that happens, the very people who drained you will walk away without a second thought. With boundaries, however, everything changes. You finally see who respects you and who only respects what you do for them. The truth is, the world does not honor endless giving. It does not reward blind loyalty. In fact, kindness without limits is often mistaken for weakness. People test your limits, they push, they take, and they keep taking until you stop them. That's why inner peace is not found in being endlessly surrounded. It comes from being selective. It comes from saying clearly, if you cannot respect my worth, then you do not deserve my presence. Standing alone then stops feeling like a punishment. It becomes a path to clarity. Solitude becomes the place where you rediscover yourself, where your worth is no longer distorted, where you remember that your energy is currency, and not everyone deserves to spend it. And here's the real shift. When you stop begging others to value you, you stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You step into a high-performance mindset, one where your focus is no longer wasted on chasing validation, but on building a life aligned with your true self. It won't be easy. The silence will feel heavy. The nights will feel bitterly cold. But these moments are not your downfall. They are your training ground. They shape resilience. They forge you into someone untouchable. Never forget this. People don't miss you when you're gone. They miss the benefits, the free therapy, the constant support, the loyalty that never asked for anything in return. But you are not a service. You are not a backup plan. You are a human being with unshakable value, a want. And once you stop walking with those who fail, to recognize that, you will finally stand tall, not as someone abandoned, but as someone free. Because the brutal truth about value is this: it isn't measured by how many people surround you. It's measured by how firmly you refuse to compromise your worth just to keep shallow company. Most people fear solitude as if it were a disease. That fear drives them into crowded rooms filled with noise, into relationships that quietly drain their spirit, into friendships that feel more like prisons than sanctuaries. They would rather sit at a table full of people who don't value them than face the silence of standing alone. But here's the paradox. Loneliness in the wrong company is far more brutal than the silence of solitude. Sitting beside someone who doesn't truly care is emptier than any quiet night spent alone. That is the trap of loneliness. The false belief that being around people automatically cures the ache of isolation. It doesn't. In fact, it often deepens the ache. Why? Because when you walk with those who don't value you, you're forced to betray yourself. You laugh when you don't feel like laughing. You nod when your heart is screaming no. You dim your own light just to preserve their comfort. Every step you take beside them is a step away from your authentic self. And that tearing apart between who you are and who you pretend to be, that is the truest, sharpest form of loneliness. And this is exactly what the Stoics understood long ago. Seneca once wrote, "If you are lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company." He wasn't talking about other people. He was talking about yourself. Because if you've never built a relationship with your own soul, if you've never nurtured self-worth and inner peace, then yes, solitude will feel like torture. But once you begin to strengthen that relationship, standing alone no longer feels frightening. It becomes liberating. Emotional intelligence is what saves you from the loneliness trap, instead of driving you to chase any connection just to fill the void. You learn to pause and ask, does this person truly see me? Or do they only see what they can take from me? Do I feel lighter in their presence, or do I feel drained? That kind of awareness protects you from confusing proximity with intimacy. Because here's the truth. Proximity does not equal loyalty. People can stand right next to you and still not stand with you. They can share your table, your laughter, even your secrets, and still not value your soul. And when you ignore this truth, you fall deeper into the trap of thinking that at least you're not alone. But the worst kind of loneliness is the one you feel when someone is sitting right beside you. So what's the way out? Boundaries. Psychological boundaries become the bridge that carries you out of false connections and into authentic solitude. Boundaries declare, I will no longer accept company that costs me my peace. They remind you that your presence has value, that your energy is currency, and not everyone deserves to spend it. At first, walking away feels like a loss. It feels like exile. But with time, you realize you aren't losing anything. You're reclaiming everything. The fake concern, the shallow loyalty, the temporary attention, they were only illusions. And when those illusions fade, what remains is something far more powerful, yourself. And here lies the paradox. Once you embrace solitude, once you learn how to walk alone, you stop feeling lonely. Because loneliness was never about the absence of people. It was about the absence of respect, the absence of value, the absence of truth in those you allowed too close. Standing alone doesn't mean you don't care about others. It means you care too much about your peace to sell it cheaply. It means you'd rather invest in self-worth than beg for crumbs of attention. It means you've chosen the discipline of solitude over the chaos of false companionship. And that choice, that difficult, courageous choice, is where transformation begins. Because the loneliness trap can only hold you as long as you fear your own company. Once you learn to sit with yourself, to nurture inner peace, to honor your own worth, you realize something life-changing. Standing alone was never the problem. Walking with those who don't value you, that was the real problem. Have you ever looked around a crowded room and felt invisible? People laughing, music playing, conversations buzzing, but deep down you feel like you don't even exist. That is the illusion of company, the presence of bodies without the presence of hearts, noise without connection, proximity without loyalty. And it deceives so many. We tell ourselves, at least I'm not alone. At least I have friends. At least I'm in a relationship. But when those connections are hollow, when the people beside you don't truly see your worth, you are lonelier than you would ever be walking in silence. The Stoics understood this deception well. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And if you surround yourself with people who drain you, belittle you, who only take without ever giving, your soul becomes stained with their shallow energy. You begin to believe that this is normal, that companionship means enduring disrespect, that love means sacrificing your peace, that friendship means tolerating betrayal. But that is not companionship, and that, what you just saw, is captivity. The illusion is dangerous because it always gives you just enough to keep you hooked, just enough attention to silence your doubts, just enough smiles to cover their indifference, just enough presence to make you question your own loneliness. But deep down, beneath the surface, you can feel it, the emptiness. You feel the weight of carrying relationships on your back, always the giver while others only take. And over time, that burden doesn't just tire you. It begins to eat away at your sense of worth. This is where emotional intelligence becomes the key, because it forces you to ask the hard questions. Do these people truly uplift me, or do they quietly resent me? Do they celebrate my growth, or does my strength make them uneasy when I'm in pain? Do they step forward to support me, or do they step back to protect themselves? The answers will reveal the truth. Many people want your light, but they want nothing to do with your darkness. They your laughter, but not your tears. They want your loyalty, but never your vulnerability. And let's be clear, that is not love. That's convenience. And here's the cost of living inside that illusion. You slowly lose yourself. You become addicted to being chosen, even if it means being chosen as an option and not a priority. You stay in places that shrink you, simply because the silence outside feels too heavy to bear. But that isn't living. That's hiding. The illusion of company traps you in endless cycles of disrespect. You accept crumbs and call it a meal. You tolerate shallow smiles and call it friendship. You endure neglect and call it love, and yet deep down you know the truth. It is better to starve alone than to be poisoned in company. So how do you break free? By remembering your worth. Self-worth is not negotiable. It doesn't depend on how others treat you. It depends on how you treat yourself. When you set boundaries, when you choose inner peace over constant noise, the illusion finally begins to fade. You realize that standing alone with dignity is infinitely more valuable than standing with many in disrespect. And here's the paradox. Once you break free from the illusion, you no longer crave the noise. You begin to appreciate the silence. You begin to see solitude as clarity. Walking alone no longer means you've been abandoned. It means you are finally aligned. It means you've stopped wasting your soul on people who could never recognize its worth. The illusion of company is seductive, yes, but it is shallow. And once your eyes adjust and you see through it, once you choose to walk away, you become untouchable. No fake smile, no conditional friendship, no hollow crowd can ever convince you that their presence is worth more than your peace. Every step you take with the wrong people comes with a cost. At first, you don't notice it. You tell yourself it's normal, that every relationship has flaws, that loyalty means staying even when it hurts. But little by little, the cost shows itself. And by the time you realize how much you've paid, you are already bankrupt in the ways that matter most. The very first thing you lose when you walk with people who don't value you is peace. You might still laugh together, still go out together, even still share secrets, but inside, you are restless. You second-guess yourself. You question if you truly matter. You waste energy trying to prove your worth to people who never deserved it in the first place. And that constant anxiety steals your inner peace. And nothing, not money, not status, not company, is ever worth that price. And beyond the loss of peace comes an even heavier price, the cost of your self-worth. Every time someone dismisses your feelings and you let it pass, a small piece of your worth begins to erode. Every time you lower your standards just to keep someone close, you teach yourself that your value is negotiable. And the tragedy is this: the more you accept disrespect, the harder it becomes to remember who you once were before you compromised. The third cost is clarity. Toxic company clouds your vision. You stop seeing reality for what it truly is. Instead, you start to believe the distorted version they feed you. You're too sensitive. You're asking for too much. This is just how things are. Slowly, you begin doubting your own perception. That fog makes you dependent on their approval, and that dependency is exactly what keeps you stuck. And then comes the most dangerous cost of all: time. Time wasted walking with the wrong people is time you never get back. It is energy that could have been invested in growth, in building, in healing. The Stoics never stopped reminding us that life is short, and wasting it on the unworthy is one of the greatest tragedies. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Walking with the wrong crowd is one of the quickest ways to waste it. Here's where emotional intelligence changes everything. When you develop it, you start to see patterns early. You stop ignoring the red flags. You stop making excuses for bad behavior. You learn to recognize that while being alone can hurt, walking with people who do value you is far more destructive. One may wound your heart, but the other destroys your soul. And this is where psychological boundaries become your shield. They give you the strength to say, "I will not sacrifice my peace for your presence. I will not compromise my worth for your comfort." And once you set those boundaries, you discover something powerful. Not everyone deserves access to you. In fact, very few do, because walking with the wrong people doesn't just cost you peace, self-worth, clarity, and time. It also robs you of your potential. You cannot rise while dragging anchors. You cannot build a high-performance mindset when your energy is constantly drained by conflict, disrespect, and betrayal. Growth requires focus, and the wrong company will always keep you distracted, caught in endless cycles of arguments, misunderstandings, empty apologies, and repeated betrayals. So what's the alternative? To stand alone. To pay the upfront cost of solitude so you don't keep paying the hidden tax of toxic company. Standing alone may feel heavy at first. It may sting with silence, but it preserves your peace. It protects your worth. It sharpens your clarity, and it saves your time. And those are the very things you need to grow, to heal, and to thrive. Remember this: it is not the absence of people that breaks you. It is the presence of the wrong ones. The real danger isn't being alone. The real danger is walking with those who secretly want you small, silent, and dependent. That is a cost far too high to pay. And once you realize that, once you stop paying the endless price of walking with the wrong people, you step into a freedom that money could never buy. A freedom built on peace, on self-respect, on boundaries, on clarity. A freedom that makes you untouchable. Solitude has been given a bad reputation. People hear the word and immediately think of emptiness, loneliness, or punishment. They picture a quiet room, heavy with silence, and assume it means being unwanted or unloved. But the truth is far different. And this is where the truth deepens. Solitude is not the absence of worth. It is the presence over time you begin to see. Silence isn't passive. It's active. It's you taking control of the one thing you truly can control: yourself. You learn to walk alone not because you have to, but because you choose to. Walking alone teaches you emotional detachment. You stop chasing closure from those who wronged you. You stop begging for love that should have been freely given. You stop explaining your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you rise quietly. You build silently. You transform in ways that make noise unnecessary. That is the strength of solitude. It's not about rejecting people forever. And this is where the path continues. Refusing to compromise your peace just to keep the wrong people close. It's about cultivating such a deep inner calm that you're never desperate for attention, never panicked by silence, never swayed by manipulation. Because once you know the strength of standing alone, you are no longer afraid of losing anyone. You know you'll survive. You know you'll rebuild. You know you'll rise. And that makes you dangerous. Not in cruelty, but in resilience. Dangerous because no one can ever again use your fear of loneliness to control you. Dangerous because you've discovered solitude is not weakness at all. It is your greatest power. Most people underestimate silence. They mistake it for surrender, for weakness, or for indifference. But silence, when chosen with discipline, is none of those things. Silence is strategy. Silence is power. It is the weapon of those who refuse to waste energy on noise that doesn't deserve a response. When people disrespect you, they crave a reaction. They want to see you crack, to hear your voice tremble, to watch you fight for validation. Why? Because your reaction feeds them. It proves they still have control over your emotions. But when you remain silent, when you don't flinch, don't give them the performance they want, you strip them of their weapon. You force them to face themselves without the shield of your anger. The Stoics mastered this principle. As they taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And silence is the highest form of refusal to react. It is emotional intelligence in motion, choosing calm over chaos, clarity over impulse, inner peace over temporary satisfaction. Silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. It communicates what words never could. It says, I see your disrespect, and I refuse to lower myself to explain why it's wrong. I know my worth, and I don't need your recognition to prove it. That kind of silence is louder than any outburst. It unsettles those who expect drama. Because without your reaction, they have nothing left to control. But silence is not only about others. It's about you. It's about conserving your energy for what truly matters. Every time you choose silence, you invest in your self-worth. You reinforce your psychological boundaries. You shield your mind from being dragged into someone else's storm. And this is where silence becomes spiritual discipline. It takes strength to hold your tongue when pride screams for revenge. It takes discipline to walk away without explaining when your ego aches to be understood. It takes wisdom to realize not every insult deserves your voice. That kind of restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. And here is the beauty. Silence always works in your favor. When you stop explaining, people begin reflecting. When you stop chasing, people start questioning. When you stop reacting, people realize they never had power over you. Your silence becomes their mirror, forcing them to confront the emptiness of their own actions. Silence also protects your inner peace. Arguments consume you. Defensiveness erodes your clarity, but silence keeps you centered. It is the pause between stimulus and response, the quiet space where wisdom lives, the reminder that you do not owe anyone a reaction simply because they demand one. And when you combine silence with solitude, you become unshakable. The people who once thrived on your emotional reactions will panic. They'll try harder to provoke you. They'll gossip. They'll lie. They'll bait you back into the game. But you'll smile, remain silent, and walk away. Because you've learned the greatest revenge is not proving them wrong. It's showing them they never had power in the first place. And so the lesson continues. Silence is not only your weapon, it is also your shield. It protects you from wasting words, from draining your energy, from handing over control of your emotions to people who never deserved it. And with every moment of silence, you grow stronger, calmer, more focused. That is the mark of someone who has mastered themselves. Because in the end, your silence speaks everything. I will not break. I will not beg. I will not explain. I will rise, and it always happens. The very people who didn't value you, the ones who disrespected your loyalty, ignored your kindness, treated you like an afterthought, they come back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even next month, but one day, when the silence grows louder than they can bear, they return. When fake smiles no longer cover the emptiness. When the thrill of using others finally wears off. That's when they remember you, and when they do, they crawl back. They will never admit the truth, and pride won't let them. So instead, they disguise it. They return with nostalgia. Remember the old times? We laughed so much together. They return with guilt, dressed as excuses. I was going through a lot. I didn't realize what I had. They return with false humility. I miss you. Things are different now. Can we talk? But here's what you must understand. None of it is about you. It's about them. It's about the hole they dug for themselves, the silence that suffocates them at night, the regret that replays every memory of you giving selflessly while they gave nothing back. They don't miss you. They miss the access. They miss the benefits. They miss the version of you who tolerated their disrespect. And this is where your emotional intelligence must stand firm, because the temptation to believe them will be strong. Part of you will whisper, maybe they've changed. Maybe they finally see my worth. Maybe this time will be different. But that's not emotional intelligence. That's emotional hunger. And if you don't control it, you will walk straight back into the same cage you fought so hard to escape. When they return, you have two choices. You either repeat the lesson or you rise above it. The Stoics would remind us that actions speak louder than words. Epictetus once asked, "How long will you wait before you demand the best of yourself?" So the real question isn't whether they have changed. The real question is whether you will. Will you choose peace over their promises? Will you choose self-worth over their excuses? Will you choose the solitude you mastered over the chaos they carry back into your life? Here's the truth. People rarely change without deep accountability. And those who once left you, those who disrespected your worth when they had full access to it, will almost always repeat the same pattern again. Why? Because they learned you forgive. They learned you stay. They learned your loyalty was stronger than your boundaries. And if you give them the same access again, you've taught them nothing, except that your silence was only temporary. That is why your psychological boundaries must remain non-negotiable. Yes, you can forgive them. Forgiveness is for your healing, not theirs. But forgiveness does not mean access. Forgiveness does not mean the door reopens. Forgiveness means you have released the bitterness, but you have also reinforced the locks. And when they return, as they always do, they will test your strength. They will push against your silence. They will try to provoke a reaction, because even your anger feels better to them than your indifference. But don't give it to them. Stay calm. Stay still. Let your silence scream louder than their apologies ever could. And here lies the irony. They will interpret your silence as punishment. But the truth is, it isn't punishment. It is protection. Protection of your inner peace. Protection of your self-worth. Protection of your growth. Because going back to those who never valued you isn't love, it's self-betrayal. And you've already betrayed yourself enough times in the past. Not anymore. This is where your spiritual discipline will be tested the most, because a part of you still craves closure. A part of you wants to hear them admit they were wrong, to watch them kneel in regret. But Stoicism teaches us something deeper. Real closure is not what they say. It's what you decide. You don't need their apology to heal. You don't need their recognition to prove your worth. You don't need their return to validate your growth. Your closure is your silence. Your closure is your refusal to walk into the same storm twice. Dish, Sac, CC 86. And remember this. When they see you thriving without them, when they realize their absence did not destroy you, that is when regret cuts the deepest. Because in their mind, you were not supposed to rise. You were not supposed to glow. You were not supposed to rebuild. Yet here you are, stronger, calmer, wiser. That is the punishment. That is the karma. Watching you live in peace without them is more devastating than any revenge you could plan. This is the moment where your high-performance mindset becomes unstoppable. Because instead of wasting energy rehashing old wounds, you invested in building your future. Instead of entertaining their return, you sharpen your focus. Instead of looking back, you move forward. And in that forward motion, you leave them behind. Not with anger, but with indifference. When they come back, remember this. You owe them nothing. Not your time. Not your attention, not your explanation. They made their choice when they devalued you. Now you make yours by protecting your peace. And though that choice may feel cold, it is actually the warmest gift you can ever give yourself. Because every time you refuse to go backward, you honor the version of you who once cried alone, who once questioned their worth, who once begged for crumbs of love. You tell that version of yourself, I see you, I value you, and I will never put you through that again. That is real self-worth. That is real inner peace. That is the strength of silence. So when they return, and they will, do not get caught in their words. Do not get lost in nostalgia. Do not fall for their guilt. Just smile. Stay silent. Keep walking, because you already won. You won the moment you chose yourself. And then, after betrayal, after silence, after countless long nights of questioning, something shifts inside you. At first, you barely notice it. A faint spark, a quiet strength, almost invisible. But as the days pass, that spark grows. It hardens into clarity. It sharpens into resolve. And one day you wake up and realize you have become untouchable. Untouchable does not mean you no longer feel pain. It does not mean you are numb or heartless. It means pain no longer controls you. It means betrayal no longer defines you. It means those who once had the power to break you can no longer touch your peace. Because your worth is no longer tied to their recognition. Becoming untouchable is the highest form of emotional intelligence. It is the mastery of knowing what deserves your energy and what never will again. And this is where the transformation takes shape, in the ability to pause before reacting, to breathe before exploding, to walk away before engaging. This isn't about building walls of bitterness. It's about building boundaries of wisdom. The very first step in becoming untouchable is reclaiming your self-worth. You stop begging for scraps of attention from people who only remembered you when it was convenient. You stop trying to prove your value to those who were blind to it all along. You no longer see yourself as an option. They either value you fully or they lose access completely. This is psychological boundaries in motion, clear, firm, unshakable. The second step is cultivating inner peace. Untouchable people are not easily provoked because they've trained themselves to find stillness in the storm. When chaos erupts around them, they don't flinch. When insults are hurled, they don't crumble. When manipulation creeps in, they don't take the bait. Their calmness becomes their shield, and their silence becomes their weapon. That kind of peace cannot be stolen because it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. The third step is practicing spiritual discipline. The Stoics understood that mastery of the self was the greatest victory of all. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." To become untouchable is to no longer be enslaved by anger, by fear, or by the constant need for validation. You rise above petty conflicts, not because you are weak, but because you have trained your soul to seek higher ground. The fourth step is developing a high-performance mindset. When you stop wasting energy on fake friends, toxic relationships, and hollow crowds, you unlock a hidden reservoir of focus. Suddenly, you are building, creating, and growing. Your solitude becomes fuel for your ambition. Your silence becomes the forge for your strength. While others are still playing games in shallow waters, you are quietly building an empire. But let's be honest. Becoming untouchable doesn't happen overnight. It is forged in the fire of heartbreak, betrayal, and loneliness. It is born in those nights when you stared at your phone, waiting for a message that never came. In the mornings when you dragged yourself out of bed with a chest heavy with sorrow. In the afternoons when you smiled in public but broke down in private. Untouchable is not given. It is earned. And once you've earned it, you never go back. Because now you know the truth. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone deserves your story. Not everyone deserves your energy. Some people are meant to be lessons, not lifelines. And once you learn that, you stop clinging to those who tried to break you. You stop explaining yourself to those who refuse to understand. You stop chasing those who never stayed. Becoming untouchable doesn't mean you will walk alone forever. It means you are finally strong enough to wait for the right people, the ones who match your peace, who respect your boundaries, who recognize your worth without needing reminders. And if they never come, you are still whole because you've already found the one person you needed all along, yourself. And here's the irony. The moment you become untouchable, the world notices. The same people who once disrespected you will watch from afar, unsettled by your silence. The same ones who took you for granted will whisper about how much you've changed. The same ones who thought you would collapse without them will choke on the truth. You're thriving. You're calmer, you're sharper, you're untouchable. And that is the kind of power they cannot control. That is the kind of strength they never expected. And that is the kind of presence that makes you unforgettable. Because in the end, becoming untouchable is never about revenge. It's not about making them suffer. It's about building a life so full of dignity, clarity, and peace that their disrespect becomes irrelevant, their betrayal meaningless, and their absence a blessing. You stand alone, yes, but you stand strong. You walk quietly, but every step echoes with power. You no longer scream for validation. Instead, you radiate self-worth. And that, more than anything, is what makes you untouchable. So here we are, after all the betrayal, the silence, the loneliness. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You rose from the ashes, stronger than they ever believed possible. And now, your peace is priceless. Your boundaries unshakable. Your presence untouchable. Remember this. You don't need the crowd to validate you. You don't need applause to confirm your worth. You don't need people who only valued what you gave, but never valued you. Walking alone is not weakness. It is strength. It is living proof that your worth no longer lies in the hands of others. It lives in you. The Stoics taught us, the best revenge is not to become like your enemy. And that's exactly what you've done. While they remain trapped in cycles of lies, games, and regret, you have chosen clarity. You have chosen dignity. You have chosen freedom. That is your power. That is your victory. And if this message resonated with you today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that walking alone can be the first step to walking in true strength. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to walk away from people who didn't value you? How did it change you? Because your story might be the light someone else needs right now. And if you're ready to keep building that unshakable mindset, to keep rising above betrayal, lies, and disrespect, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join this community of warriors who choose peace over chaos, dignity over disrespect, and self-mastery over compromise. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your power. So walk tall, walk free, and remember, it's always better to stand alone than to walk with those who don't value you. Stay strong, stay untouchable, and above all, protect your peace.